Imagine being lost in the wilderness as darkness falls. No phone signal. No one knowing where you are. That's exactly what happened to two young sisters on a quiet autumn afternoon. But what saved them wasn't a search helicopter or a rescue team. It was something far more unexpected. A horse named Thunder who refused to move forward on a trail ride, and whose instincts would turn him into an unlikely hero. This is the incredible true story of how animal intuition saved two lives. Our story begins in the small mountain town of Cedar Ridge, nestled in the Cascade Mountains of Washington state. The Morrison family had lived here for 3 generations. Sarah Morrison, a warm-hearted woman in her late 30s with wavy chestnut brown hair and kind hazel eyes, worked as a school librarian. Her husband, David, a sturdy man in his early 40s with short dark hair, a neatly trimmed beard, and laugh lines around his blue eyes, ran the local hardware store. Together, they were raising 2 adventurous daughters. 10-year-old Emma was the older sister, a spirited girl with long blonde hair usually tied in a ponytail, bright blue eyes full of curiosity, and a smattering of freckles across her nose and cheeks. She had an oval face, a confident smile, and stood about 4.5 feet tall with a slim athletic build. Emma loved exploring and was always the first to suggest an adventure. Her younger sister, 7-year-old Lily, looked up to Emma in every way. Lily had lighter, shoulder-length blonde hair that framed her round cherubic face, the same blue eyes as her sister but wider and more innocent, and dimples that appeared whenever she smiled. She was smaller and more petite, reaching just above Emma's shoulder, with a gentle, trusting nature that made everyone want to protect her. It was a crisp Saturday morning in late October. The girls had been begging their parents all week to go on a nature walk to their favorite spot, a small clearing by Willow Creek where they liked to collect interesting rocks and watch for deer. Sarah was hesitant. The weather forecast mentioned possible rain later in the day, and she had errands to run. But the girls' enthusiasm was infectious, and David assured her they'd be back before lunch. "We'll stick to the main trail," Emma promised, her blue eyes earnest and sincere. "We know the way by heart, Mom." What none of them knew was that a storm system was moving in faster than predicted, and that this simple walk would turn into a parent's worst nightmare. At 9 a.m., Emma and Lily set off down the familiar trail, their small backpacks filled with snacks and water bottles. The forest was breathtaking that morning. Maple trees blazed with red and gold leaves, and the earthy scent of autumn filled the air. Emma led the way confidently, occasionally turning back to make sure Lily was keeping up. "Look, Emma," Lily called out, pointing to a deer that stood motionless about 30 feet away, watching them with liquid brown eyes. The girls froze, enchanted by the moment. But as they continued walking, excited by their wildlife encounter, they made a fateful decision. "I think I saw the deer go this way," Emma said, pointing to what looked like a smaller side trail. "Maybe there are more." Without realizing it, they had left the main path. 20 minutes later, Emma stopped walking. The confident expression on her face had shifted to uncertainty. She looked around at the surrounding trees. None of them looked familiar anymore. "Emma." Lily's voice was small and worried. "Where's the creek? We should have reached it by now." Emma felt her stomach drop as the reality sank in. They were lost. She tried to backtrack, but every direction looked the same, endless trees and undergrowth with no distinguishing features. Then the sky began to darken. What had been a bright autumn morning suddenly turned grey as thick clouds rolled in. Within minutes, a cold rain began to fall, light at first, then steadily heavier. The girls huddled together under a large pine tree, their thin jackets quickly soaking through. Emma pulled out her mother's old flip phone that she'd been allowed to bring. No signal. Of course not. They were deep in the woods now. Back in town, Sarah glanced at the kitchen clock, 12:30 p.m. Her stomach tightened. The girls should have been home an hour ago. She called David at the hardware store, trying to keep the panic out of her voice. "They're probably just running late, lost track of time," David said, but she could hear the worry creeping into his voice too. By 1 p.m., both parents were in their SUV, driving toward the trailhead. By 2 p.m., when they'd searched the main trail and found no sign of their daughters, Sarah was on the phone with the sheriff's department, her hands shaking. "My daughters are missing," she said, her voice breaking. "They went into the woods this morning and they haven't come back." Within an hour, a search operation was underway. Sheriff Tom Bridges, a weathered man in his 50s with gray hair and a serious demeanor, coordinated teams of volunteers. Search and rescue personnel combed the main trails. The rain made everything harder. It washed away footprints and made visibility poor. As darkness began to fall around 6 p.m., the temperature dropped dramatically. Sarah stood at the trailhead, wrapped in a blanket someone had given her face pale and drawn with fear. David kept walking the perimeter, calling his daughters' names until his voice grew hoarse. Hours passed with no sign of Emma and Lily. The girls had now been missing for 9 hours. Deep in the forest, Emma and Lily were in serious trouble. They had tried to find shelter under a rocky overhang, but they were both soaked to the bone and shivering uncontrollably. Lily was crying softly, and Emma wrapped her arms around her sister, trying to share what little warmth they had. "I'm sorry, Lily," Emma whispered, her voice trembling. "I should have stayed on the main trail. I should have listened to Mom." "I'm scared, Emma," Lily whimpered. "I want to go home." "I know, sweetie. Me too." Emma had never felt so helpless in her life. She was the big sister, the responsible one, and she'd led them into danger. As darkness fell completely and the sounds of the forest grew strange and amplified, both girls huddled together, exhausted and terrified, hoping that somehow someone would find them. 3 miles away, at the Cascade Ridge stables, a different scene was unfolding. Jennifer Blake, a seasoned trail guide in her early 30s with auburn hair pulled back in a practical braid, strong athletic build, and a deeply tanned face from years outdoors, was preparing for an unusual request. Despite the weather, a couple of experienced riders had insisted on a guided evening ride. They were leaving town the next day and wanted one last ride through the mountains. Jennifer was reluctant, but they were adamant. She saddled up 3 horses. Her clients would ride Daisy and Scout, while she would ride Thunder, her most reliable horse. Thunder was a magnificent bay stallion, standing 16 hands high with a gleaming dark brown coat, black mane and tail, and an intelligent white blaze down his face. His dark eyes were remarkably expressive, and Jennifer had always sworn he understood more than people gave him credit for. They set out on a wide loop trail that Jennifer knew well, even in poor weather. The rain had lightened to a drizzle, but visibility was still limited. They'd been riding for about 30 minutes when Thunder suddenly stopped dead in his tracks. Jennifer gave him a gentle squeeze with her legs, the signal to move forward. Thunder didn't budge. This was completely unlike him. "Come on, boy," Jennifer said, more firmly. Thunder tossed his head and took a step backward instead of forward. He whinnied loudly, a sound that seemed urgent, almost insistent. Then he did something Jennifer had never seen him do before. He turned completely off the trail, pushing his way between trees toward a steep, rocky area that wasn't part of any trail system. "Thunder, what are you doing?" Jennifer pulled gently on the reins, but Thunder was determined. He kept moving forward into the dense undergrowth, his ears pricked forward, nostrils flaring. Jennifer had worked with horses for 15 years. She'd learned to trust their instincts. Horses could sense things humans couldn't. "Wait here," she called to her clients. "I'm going to see what he's reacting to." She gave Thunder his head, allowing him to pick his way carefully through the underbrush. The horse moved with purpose, climbing over fallen logs, navigating around boulders, heading steadily uphill toward the rocky area. Jennifer had to duck under low branches, and more than once wondered if she was making a mistake following Thunder into terrain this rough. But the horse seemed absolutely certain of his direction. He whinnied again, loud and insistent, and then suddenly quickened his pace to a trot. And then Jennifer saw them. At first, she thought her eyes were playing tricks on her in the dim light. Under a rocky overhang, barely visible in the shadows, were 2 small figures huddled together. "Oh my God," Jennifer breathed. She dismounted quickly, her boots slipping slightly on the wet rocks. "Hello. Are you okay?" 2 pairs of blue eyes looked up at her, wide with fear, exhaustion, and sudden desperate hope. "Please help us." Emma's voice was barely a whisper. "We've been lost all day." Jennifer's training kicked in immediately. She quickly assessed the situation. 2 young girls, severely cold and wet, but conscious and alert. She radioed to her clients to call 911 immediately and give their coordinates. Then she removed her own rain jacket and wrapped it around Lily, who was shaking so hard she could barely stand. She pulled emergency thermal blankets from her stole bag and wrapped both girls. Thunder stood nearby, perfectly calm now, as if his job was done. The next hour was a blur of activity. Search and rescue teams converged on their location. Paramedics examined the girls. Miraculously, aside from mild hypothermia and exhaustion, they were unharmed. And then Sarah and David arrived. The sound Sarah made when she saw her daughters was something Jennifer would never forget, a sob of pure relief and overwhelming love. Sarah dropped to her knees and pulled both girls into her arms, crying and kissing their wet hair, checking them over with trembling hands. David wrapped his arms around all three of them, his face buried in Emma's hair, his shoulders shaking. "We're so sorry, Mom," Emma sobbed. "We went off the trail and, sure, baby, you're safe. That's all that matters. You're safe." As the family prepared to leave with the paramedics, Sarah turned to Jennifer with tears streaming down her face. "Thank you. Thank you so much for finding them." Jennifer smiled and shook her head. "Don't thank me. Thank him." She gestured to Thunder, who stood calmly nearby, water dripping from his manet. Sarah walked over to the horse and pressed her forehead against his neck. Thunder nickeled softly, a gentle sound of acknowledgement. The sheriff later confirmed what everyone suspected. If Jennifer and Thunder hadn't found the girls that night, with temperatures dropping into the 30s, the outcome could have been tragic. Thunder had somehow sensed the girls in distress and refused to continue until he'd led his rider to them. Some called it coincidence. Jennifer knew better. She'd seen the determination in Thunder's eyes, the purposeful way he'd navigated straight to that rocky overhang. Horses, she'd always believed, knew things we couldn't explain. And on that cold October night, Thunder's instincts had saved 2 lives. Today, Emma and Lily are teenagers. They still live in Cedar Ridge, and they still love exploring the outdoors, but they never stray from marked trails. Every year on the anniversary of their rescue, the Morrison family visits Thunder at Cascade Ridge stables, bringing him apples and carrots and spending time with the horse who saved their daughters' lives. Thunder is older now, retired from trail rides, but his eyes are still bright and knowing. And sometimes, when Emma and Lily visit, they swear he remembers that night too. This is a reminder that heroes come in all forms, and sometimes, the instincts of an animal can be more powerful than any human technology. Never underestimate the bond between humans and animals. It just might save your life. Like and subscribe for more interesting stories.